Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our first virtual chat, Inside Soccer with Professional Soccer Twins. I am Leslie Lungard with the Office of Development and Alumni Relations. The university is excited to offer these virtual events to our alumni, parents, and friends while we all navigate these trying times. As we have done so often, in person in various cities around the country, we love to showcase our alumni and their expertise. Tonight is no different, in a common space, but rather in our living rooms and kitchens. However, we are equally thrilled you have joined us as an audience for this fun, informational, virtual chat we are about to have, Inside Soccer with Professional Soccer Twins. Before I start tonight's program, a few housekeeping comments. Participants are muted during this program, but you may continue to submit questions through the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. Additionally, we are recording this program and it will be available to all participants next week. I am thrilled to introduce to you twin brothers David and Michael Kammarman, classes of 1993, both with amazing careers in professional soccer. David is a global scout for the Los Angeles Football Club in Major League Soccer, while Michael is press officer for the U.S. men's national team. You may guess who is who on your screen. Moderating what I know will be a lively conversation between the twins is Fox Sports studio host Rob Stone. Rob has known the brothers for many years as a colleague and friend, and we welcome him to our program tonight as an honorary Blue Hen. David and Michael are natives of Laurel, Maryland, and graduated with a BS in political science in 1993. Before, together they spent the better part of 2 years backpacking across the world. While at UD, both brothers played for the UD men's soccer team, and David was captain in 1992. David has worked in professional soccer for most of the last 25 years, including stops in Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. He's been fortunate to work with who can be considered the two best coaches in U.S. soccer history, Bob Bradley and Bruce Arena, as well as legendary players such as David Beckham, Landon Donovan, and Garth Bale. In what has been quite an unusual career path, he began as a media relations consultant before moving on to equipment manager, assistant coach, director of soccer operations, and now his current role as global scout for LAFC in Major League Soccer. He also spent time as an on-air researcher for ESPN, working 20 matches during the 2006 FIFA World Cup. Michael has been with U.S. Soccer as the press officer for the U.S. men's national team since 2001. Working alongside the top players and coaches in the United States for 2 decades. He has managed the team's media relations through 4 World Cups and more than 15 international tournaments and 300 matches overall. After volunteering for the 1994 World Cup in the United States, he began a career in communications in 1996 with DC United. During his 4 seasons, the team won 3 MLS Cups and the US Open Cup. He also spent 18 months at ESPN doing soccer research and assisting on match productions for the international network. Rob Stone, our moderator tonight, hosts Fox Sports studio coverage of soccer, including MLS, FIFA, Copa, and European leagues, college basketball, college football, including Saturday night pregame show, The Big Noon Kickoff. He is the lead play-by-play announcer for Fox Sports coverage of the Go Bowling Professional Bowlers Association tour on Fox and FS1, and was a former WWE 24/7 champion. He has been a sideline reporter traveling the world for games and has quickly become one of the sports television's most versatile and respected personalities. Please join me in welcoming David, Michael, and Rob to tonight's virtual chat, Inside Soccer with Professional Soccer Twins.
Leslie, thank you. My goodness, the resume reading took you half the program. We got about 7 minutes left. I didn't know David had accomplished that much. I'm awfully impressed. I'm also somewhat thankful. Actually, young Rob Stone would have been thankful that your names were labeled below here on the Zoom call, because in the early stages of my times with the Camerman brothers, I did not know which one I was talking to. And each time it was kind of a 50-50, like, pretty sure this one's Mike. It's David. It's David. It's good to have you guys. Always good to see you guys, and nice to reconnect. Delaware, hello. Blue Hen Nation. Michael and David, I don't know if you guys know this. My first association with Delaware was the 2003 NCAA 1AA football championship game in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where Delaware took on this guy's Colgate team and throttled us. And one of the highlights was interviewing Senator Joe Biden on the sideline. And I think I just called him Joe. Like, hey, Joe, was how I jumped into it. So there's my Delaware knowledge. Guys, good to see you. David, let's start with you. Give me your fondest memory of the University of Delaware.
Oh my goodness. I don't think there's one, Rob. Like, Delaware was such a cool place to go to school. It was like the location in between Baltimore, Philly, New York, Atlantic City, the beaches. Greek life was great. Being an athlete was really cool. So I think the whole experience was awesome. And being a poli-sci major, that was never really part of the plan. I remember I took a class called American Foreign Policy, and the teacher, like a few weeks in, made some kind of reference to Star Trek during his lecture. And I was like, that's pretty freaking cool. So I go up to the guy after class. I'm like, hey, Dr. Oliver, what department is this? He's like, political science? And I was like, cool, I'm a poli-sci major. So it was 4.5 years was awesome. So I don't think there's one thing. It was just a great place to go to school, and I wouldn't change anything.
Michael, I can't tell. Did you enjoy your fraternity life? If only there was a visual that could help me out with that.
That's 314 Wyoming Road. Yeah,
That address alone sounds like a lot of hell went down there.
we did our best. We were
Yes.
right across the street from Pica too. So the Italian American a lot fraternity, but yeah, I mean, like being in API and being a part of a team, like growing up, Dave and I played on soccer teams since we were 6 years old. And we were, a lot of the guys that we played with, starting when we were kids, we played with all the way through high school. And so a big part of our culture was being on not just playing soccer, but what it meant to be on a team, to the time bonding together, the commitment to each other, the accountability,
The drinking.
everybody committed to a cause. And so when going to Delaware and then like being a part of AEPI, it was just a continuation of that. So, I mean, like David said, it was a great 4 years, a great place to go to school, and still have friends from there to this day.
David, when you look back on it, how did Delaware make you the man you are today and give you the tools to make you succeed in the profession that you chose?
I think part of it was, to be honest, as a team, we struggled. So, and that was something that I wasn't used to, because we growing up, we were on winning teams. Mm-hmm. So having to deal with the adversity of showing up every day on a team that not only wasn't winning, but, there was so much other stuff going on at Delaware that it was hard to commit yourself to being an athlete, because the social life was great and everything else. So I think the perseverance part of having to motivate yourself almost every day was something that can sort of carry you through adversity that you face later on in life, whether it's professional or otherwise. So that's something I think that I always took away from my time at Delaware.
And Michael, you reflect back on your time at Delaware. What was the best use of your brother's identity?
So we shared a fake ID.
You're not going to tell the other story? Stick with that one.
Well, two things. One, we obviously we shared a fake ID, so that made life a lot easier until we actually turned 21. I think there was one time we were at a fraternity party.
Just one time.
There was just one time.
This was just great.
I was at a fraternity party, and I got approached by a girl. And look, remember, we played on the same soccer team. We were in the same fraternity. We also took most of the same classes. We were both political science majors, as Leslie mentioned in her intro. So a lot of people recognize us, but like yourself, didn't necessarily know who was who. So
Right.
One time I was at a party and got approached by a girl. She knew I played soccer. She knew I played I was in a fraternity, but she didn't know exactly who I was. So she asked me what my name was, and I said David.
We've all been there.
And then hang on, Stoner. Then the next day,
yes, go on.
then the next day, we're in a class of like 300 people, and like my brother's sitting on my left, and this girl comes up and sits next to me, and she sort of grabs my hand and starts telling me how much fun she had last night, and she can't wait to hang out again. And I'm looking at her like, I have no idea who this is. And I look to my left, and my brother is gone.
Obviously something I'm not proud of.
That is so, all right, that's good.
And by the way, one more thing too, now that you mentioned.
Yes, go.
I think when I was a freshman, I had to take calculus, and my math is still horrendous. So it was a pass-fail class, and I had one exam that I had to get a 70 on to like pass-fail.
I think I know where this is going.
So, yeah, maybe I should admit that now, but whatever, I have my degree. But I sent my brother.
How long did it take you to get that?
We can talk about that later. So I sent my brother in to get a 70 on a calculus exam, and he got like a 68 or something, and I failed.
Oh, Michael.
I didn't do any worse than he did.
Right. Good point. You kicked him up 20 points or so. We've taken in some questions already, and I'm going to get to some of my questions and some of the questions from your fellow alums and students and parents out there. But I saw one that just popped up. It's the smallest font I've ever seen in my life, so it's blurry. So I'm putting up my glasses because I want to read the name here on the question and answer tab. Carly Smith. I played ice hockey and am also a twin. So what was your favorite part of playing with your twin? I'll start with you, Michael, and then David, you follow up.
I mean, I think it's a hard question to answer when you're like a twin. You get asked a question a lot, and obviously she is too, right? So like when people ask what's it like to be a twin, I think our response is, what's it like not to be? Because we've been twins our whole lives, right? So this is our experience. I think probably it's not like we thought about it. We didn't plan to go to the same school. We didn't plan to do all the same things that we did. We just kind of did it. So, I mean, I think if you had to say something that was cool about it, it was just that, you know, the understanding was always there from the beginning. So it's not like you didn't have to have conversations about things on the field too, right? I mean, obviously, when you play soccer, communication, particularly nonverbal communication, is a huge part of it, and that was never, that was never an issue.
Same question for you, Dave.
Rob, I don't have anything to add to that answer, so I'm going to do what I forgot to do at first, which is toast to our fellow University of Delaware graduates and people who, watching at home in the United States and around the world. This was back in the day at Delaware. Jaeger was a thing to drink. It was on tap in every bar, so there was plenty of this going down. So cheers to everyone watching, and also thanks to Rob Stone for doing this. We didn't have to blackmail or bribe him to do it. Not that you're aware of.
Yeah, not that you're aware of. I'll hit you guys up a little bit later. Don't worry about that. When you guys were at Delaware, were there plans to have a career in soccer? Was that anywhere in the back of your head? Because I know, when we all kind of came up in this industry together in that mid to late 90s, where we all kind of launched ourselves, that there was just a handful, and that might be generous, of people who essentially made a living in the soccer industry.
Honestly, Rob, no, not even in the least. I think after, poli-sci was sort of an accident, a happy accident, but I never really thought that it was going to be job training, particularly when it came to professional sports. But the plan after graduating was to go to Europe and then just see what happened in life after. So it wound up, I think, being we kind of got lucky with a series of happy accidents that both of us wound up finding our way in professional sports. But for sure, no plan whatsoever. I didn't think, honestly, I didn't have any idea what the future was going to be like.
What were those happy accidents that got you into the business?
Well, we both had volunteered for a sports PR firm in DC, and they were responsible for running the media center in the World Cup in '94. So both of us volunteered in the media center in '94, and the guy who was like oversaw it all in '96 became the press officer for DC United. His name was Bo Wright. And Bo, in the middle of that year, was so, I think, overwhelmed with his job that he hired both of us to come help him. It was the middle of summer. We had both just gotten back from Europe, actually. That's a whole nother story, but we had both gotten back from Europe, and then we started helping Bo, and then it just kind of went from there.
Michael, what were some of those early challenges doing public relations for a brand new league and a team that set the tone very early on that they were really the standard bearer in Major League Soccer?
Yeah, so just before we move off of Delaware, I think it's one thing important to mention that, well, two things. One, David mentioned that we started in as volunteers at the '94 World Cup. That sports PR firm was actually the guy who ran it was a friend of our father's, who, when my dad graduated American University in 1967, his first job out of school was with the Washington Whips, which was a team in the old, I think it was called American Soccer League, and then the NASL. Yeah. So he was the team administrator, and Charlie Brotman was the guy who did the PR. And so Charlie's group also did the PR at the ATP tour stop and the tennis tournament in DC every summer. So that's how we got started doing that stuff as kids. I mean, we were running around the tournament. We were 7 years old and volunteered there for 15 years plus for a week every summer. So that's kind of that snowball. But also, so one, it was my dad who got us into it, but also, we wouldn't have been at Delaware, and we wouldn't have gotten through Delaware, and we wouldn't have had 0 student loans if it wasn't for our dad. So,
cheers, Dad.
Back to the Jaeger with Dad. So we were lucky a little bit in '96 and '97 in DC. So we were lucky because DC is an international city, right, as a starting point, and it had a pretty good soccer like a pretty decent soccer culture. So DC United as an organization had started out really well with the values, with their culture, with the staff. There was just a lot of soccer people, and it was a little bit of a soccer city. So while a lot of MLS teams were struggling for any kind of coverage, we were actually able to do just a little bit better. But having said that, it still took a lot of grinding it out to make it happen. Look, the Washington Post reporter was Stephen Goff, who is still their soccer writer to this day. So had a relationship with Steve then and all the way through till now. And I remember, like, after games, it wasn't like TV stations weren't coming out to games. No one was sending cameras and stuff. And we would literally drive videotapes of the games to the TV stations afterwards to see if they would show highlights. And one of the things that was interesting about that time was, so during the week, it was really hard to get soccer coverage because the sports editors, the TV producers were kind of a little bit of an older generation and kind of had grown up with either a soccer bias or just no knowledge whatsoever. So it was hard to get coverage in the week, but on the weekends, when it was kind of, let's say, the B team, it was a younger group and they were more open to soccer coverage. So I think what we realized back then was it was going to take almost a generation to turn over, where the people who would be in positions of influence, whether it was editors, producers, sponsors, etc., that had grown up with the game, where there would be, that type of leap. But back then, we were in a decent spot in DC.
You're in a great spot. You guys really kind of set the tone for the league. David, give me a story of how you guys had to struggle to spread the soccer gospel in the early years.
Honestly, Rob, I think I was more, after '96, I was more on the team side. So I was an assistant equipment manager while I was still trying to play soccer. So I do remember, and I don't remember when you started, but like in the early days, we had to do everything. We took statistics by hand. We wrote everything, like game notes, everything like that was all by hand. I think we might have been in the booth together. I don't remember when you started, but So I wouldn't say, my brother's probably a better answer for that, because once I started in the equipment room, I really sort of left that side of it and went, I was more on the, working on inside the locker room every day.
You guys have seen so many places, experienced so many people and moments in American soccer. And what I find fascinating is there's kind of one personality that I really associate with both of you guys, and that's Bruce. Bruce Arena, he's Mount Rushmore of American soccer coaches for me. And I know you guys have all dealt with him in different levels. And Michael, you dealt with him on club and national team levels. So, and we know what kind of personality he is. He may have mellowed just a little bit, but we know how fiery he was in those early days. You know, give the folks from Delaware here a taste of what Bruce was in the DC days, and then what Bruce was with the U.S. national team. Michael.
Well, look, I mean, if you remember what people remember from DC United back in the early days, DC United was the flagship team. I mean, champions in 96, 97, 99, went to the final in 98, lost to the Chicago Fire, where his assistant coach, Bradley, had gone. We won the Inter-American Cup, which was against Vasco da Gama. So I mean, DC United really set the standard in the early days. And when it came to Bruce, like you said, he hasn't changed much. He's mellowed a little bit, but he's still the same guy. And like Bruce, there isn't too many people in the world that can get away with all the personality that Bruce has and not be successful. But he's been successful. So he's a guy that players love, or at least for the most part love to play for. He's got a good sense of humor. He's self-deprecating. It was just fun to work there and fun to be a part of. So I think that's probably one of the things that people enjoy the most, is that it's a fun environment to be around. But he can also be a really big ball buster. And if you're not the kind of person, and he's a ball buster for one, and two, he's not one that offers a whole lot of praise. So if you're the kind of person who can't take a whole lot of crap from people, and if you're somebody who needs positive reinforcement and someone telling you you're doing a good job, then you'd have a hard time working for Bruce.
And it was hard working for Bruce. It was hard working around Bruce some days as well. You know that, David. You were on the road with the U.S. national team in the early days of DC. And what do you remember from the Bruce era, which is still continuing in New England, by the way? Yeah.
So, I mean, it's weird because Bruce and Bob, were the coaches, coach and assistant coach in 96 and 97. And then Bob went to Chicago. And I remember Bruce, whatever. Yeah, Bruce used to have a lot of nice things, compliments about my girlfriend at the time, and how much better he'd be for her than I was. But then
sounds right. Yep.
But then in 98, when Bob went to Chicago, I had sort of written up this idea that I wanted to be an apprentice coach with Bob and go work with him and then do whatever other job that he wanted. And before I ever actually said it to him, they had hired somebody else. So that didn't become a possibility. And then in 99, Bob's equipment manager got injured in preseason carrying bags. So the best way to describe it in soccer terms is they called and asked if they could take me on loan as an equipment manager to Chicago. And so I decided I would go for a month and make a little bit of money. I was still trying to go on trials and stuff. So I went with Bob for a month, and then I think a month became 2. And then Bruce, I was at the national team at that point, and he was going on his first tournament trip to the Confederations Cup. And Bruce called Bob and asked if he could borrow me for the Confederations Cup. So I sort of went from on loan to called up to the national team. So and spent a month with Bruce. And then I wound up going back to Chicago and worked with Bob basically every day from then on the next 8 years. So I wound up having an education that I would say my brother spent a lot of time working with Bruce, And I spent a lot of time working with Bob. And then Bob wound up going to the national team later on. My brother worked with Bob. And in 2009, Bruce hired me as director of soccer. And I went and worked with Bruce for 7.5 years. So the soccer education that I was able to get from working with those two guys was certainly unique.
I want to transition to World Cups with the U.S. men's national team, and both of you guys have had different roles in participating in these World Cups, whether it's on the coverage side or managing the teams and managing the press, Michael, obviously. And I think all of us as American soccer fans have one or two or three or five or 10 moments that pop, that stand out, that resonate, that will never leave us surrounding what the U.S. men's national team has done at past World Cups, or maybe what they haven't done if you talk about 98 and 06 and things like that. So I'll start with you, Michael, and then David, you can follow it up. What are those memories? And they can be anything that stick with you that are going to go in your book, if you will, down the line.
I mean, the starting point I would say is that having been to Stanley Cups and World Series, I've never been to a Super Bowl, but like the World Cup is the best sporting event in the world. And the reason why I say that is because it's people from all over the world who are there to not just like support their teams, but just to celebrate something that they really, really love. And there's certainly rivalries, but it's mostly good natured. But just to have that experience of people from all over the world together and see what that festival is like, and in some cases, it's history changing, and not because of what happens on the field. So when I say that, what I think of is 2006 in Germany, which for me, like as a World Cup goes, it was the best run that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of 4 with the national team. But what was interesting in Germany was, that for really since World War II, Germans, had it was a struggle for them to have any sense of pride about being German. And so this was a time when the whole world was watching and the whole world was visiting. And to be there for the month and to see how the German people started to feel comfortable about being proud about being German, it was a really amazing thing to witness. I guess so like on the personal side, what will I remember from World Cups? Well, 2002, I think we came out of nowhere. Nobody expected for us to do what we did and to reach the quarterfinals and to beat Mexico. And look, I friggin' hate Mexico. As a team, like Duke is a close second, but cannot stand Mexico. So playing them in a World Cup is like it's a once in a lifetime thing. And I remember waking up that day thinking like this could be the best day or the worst day of my life. And so and I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to sit in the press box, and Rob and David obviously, but a press box is a place where it's silent. Like you're not allowed to cheer. It's all, you have to be professional and objective, and people in the US get kicked out of press boxes for cheering. So during that World Cup and for that game, I didn't sit in the press box. I actually got to sit in the VIP tribune, sitting next to our president, Sunil Gulati, and his wife, who was Mexican. So when Landon scores that second goal, there's a little bit of a look around like, can I do this? And then we just went nuts.
Hell yeah, you can do it. Yeah.
So that was obviously huge. And then 2010, just being a part of the experience when Landon scored that last minute goal against Algeria. And you mentioned having the opportunity to meet Senator Biden. Well, in 2010, before we left for the World Cup, we went to the White House to take a picture with President Obama. Well, that particular day, not only was the President Obama there, but so was Vice President Biden and President Clinton. So we got to take a picture with all three of them, and the president spoke to us, and it was great to have that moment. But then we're just standing in the lobby, kind of waiting until our bus is ready to leave, and Vice President Biden just kind of saddles up and starts talking. And I was standing with Jim Hashimoto, who was the trainer at the time, but also a University of Delaware grad. So we're just BSing with Vice President Biden. And two things I remember. One is like he is just dropping F-bombs left and right. And me and Haas are looking at each other like, I mean, I guess he can say that in the White House, right? So he says, well, what are you guys doing now? We're getting ready to go to Philadelphia. We got a training session this afternoon. He's like, well, what are you doing right now? Because if you've got time, I'd be happy to show you around the house. And like over his shoulder were his handlers, and you could see the look on their face like, oh, here we go again. So we asked Bob, and next thing you know, he's taking the whole team on a tour of the White House.
Beautiful.
And we spent a half hour in his office. And it was fantastic. And then we wound up seeing him again in South Africa. But just the moment, Landon scoring the goal against Algeria and what that was like afterwards was obviously another, just a game changer for the sport.
David?
Mine involves drinking, Rob. I know that's going to surprise you.
Carry on. Was I involved in that?
No, not this time. So the Mexico game, I was in Chicago, and it was like, I think it was on at like 3 a.m. or something. So myself, former spouse, Jesse Marsh, a guy named Darian Chapman, who was a TV announcer in D.C. and then Chicago, God rest his soul. And a bunch of us went to an Irish bar called Fido down in downtown Chicago. And I remember we had to walk past a Mexican restaurant, and like we weren't arrogant at that point. So all, like the Mexican fans were just giving us a boatload of shit. Jesse was wearing Chicago Fire gear. I have no idea why he was doing that. Maybe. So anyway, so Fido is packed. Like for a U.S. soccer game, it was just unbelievable at 3 a.m. that it was like wall to wall. You couldn't move. And so obviously we're maybe consuming some of these apple juices during the game. And then we win, and we got to walk past the Mexican restaurant again and show them our love and appreciation for their support.
Uh-huh.
And then, so the next day, like I lived in downtown, and I had to leave my house at 6 o'clock every morning to go up to training in Lake Forest, no matter what. So I probably got home at like 5 something. I was maybe a little tipsy, maybe should not have operated a vehicle, but I had to go to training. So I go up, and it was always me and Bob first. Nobody else was around. And so I don't know what I smelled like, but Bob was like, he's like, where'd you watch the game? And I was like, didn't do anything special. So the next day, our team was playing in Indianapolis. I don't remember if it was exhibition, Open Cup, or whatever. But my apartment was sort of central between Lake Forest and like where everybody lived, and then going to Indy. So the team was meeting at my apartment. So everybody shows up at my house, and then the bus pulls up, and it's covered in newspaper, all the windows. And I'm like, what's going on here? So it turns out, I didn't remember, but some photographer had taken a picture of me and my former spouse, and it was on the cover of the Tribune in color above the fold. Like, that never happened in soccer. And now the whole bus is covered in it. And I'm like, oh God. I don't know why I lied to Bob about it, but he wouldn't have cared, but I did. And so now I'm getting on the bus, and like, Bob always sits in like the second row, first seat, and I just walking by it. I'm like, hey, Bob.
That's good. That's good.
So that was
another
a
character.
glorious World Cup memory for me. And then one real quick one too. I worked on the broadcast, like we all did. We did ESPN in 2006, and I worked with Dave O'Brien and Marcelo Balboa. So we were going to the game in Kaiserslautern, and we had to get there 2 or 3 hours before the game. So we're walking into the tunnel, and there's a bridge where fans walked into the stadium, and I look up and I see a Frankie Haydick jersey, and I'm like, that's pretty freaking cool that there's a guy wearing a Frankie Haydick jersey. And then I look a little closer, and I'm like, Dukes, what are you doing here? It was Frankie Haydick wearing his own jersey, drinking a beer like 2.5 hours before the game. It was
awesome. Man. That's the beauty about this. And Michael, I loved your comment about the World Cup, because I've been saying that for a while too, that it is the greatest sporting event on the planet. It has surpassed and I think lapped the Olympics. It's one of those kind of like destination type trips that I tell people to invest in. If you want to do something right, go to a World Cup, and you don't have to be a hardcore soccer fan, but you will understand the passion and you'll be swept in it. Your team doesn't have to be playing. You don't have to be at the games. You can be at the pubs downtown in the cities and just feel it. And it's amazing event. All right, we got another good. We've got some old questions I'm going to get to in a moment, but we got another good Q&A, and this is from Michael Lohr. And this one, I'll throw this one at you, Michael. Knowing soccer was still in its infancy in popularity and exposure in the U.S. when we hosted it in '94, how important is the 2026 World Cup, which the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are all co-hosting, to showcase how much the sport has grown here since?
Well, first of all, having the right to host the World Cup is massive. But I think that it's different than it was in '94, and here's why. So when '94 takes place, the first question is, well, we got awarded the World Cup rights July 4th, 1988, right? And at the time, the world is saying,
remember that.
Why the hell is the U.S. getting to host the World Cup? These people don't know anything about soccer, right? So in '94, it was a chance for us to demonstrate that soccer was viable in the United States. And part of the World Cup in '94, part of the promise was that a professional league would follow, right? So to this day, the 1994 World Cup is still the most successful in terms of ticket sales and revenue. And so that part was a big game changer for the country, or for the sport in the United States. We don't have to accomplish that anymore. Soccer has arrived. It's not when is soccer going to get here. And how do we know? One of the ways we know is that in 1999, when the Columbus Crew built their stadium, right? That was the first soccer specific stadium. There's been 20 stadiums plus built since then for soccer in the last 20 years. People don't invest billions of dollars in the sport to build stadiums if they don't think that it's going to be here to stay. So obviously it's just one measure, but the moral to the story is that soccer has arrived in the United States and it's not going anywhere. The question is, how do we get to the next level? And that's where 2026 that's where it can change the sport in this country. Is can soccer be a part of it, but can soccer compete with the top sports in the United States? And I think that's where the real opportunity lies. The interesting thing about soccer for us, right, is not only are we competing against the other sports in the United States, but as you know, Rob, we're competing against soccer globally. Right? Your average Saturday here in the U.S., you can watch 50 games from around the world, and you show a lot of those games. So people aren't just choosing between soccer and watching soccer and watching football. They're choosing between watching the Premier League or the Bundesliga or MLS. So I think the 2026 World Cup is the opportunity for us to take the sport to the next level against compared to the other sports in this country, from a sponsorship, marketing, TV, advertising, fans, that everything across the board.
The 1998 World Cup, the most profitable World Cup ever until 2026, when those numbers get absolutely blown away. Again, it's an expanded format. More nations will be participating. For the first time ever, 3 different countries are hosting. It is going to be an absolute unparalleled event, and there's a lot of energy generated around it already. A lot of these host cities are now battling to get into that final pool of cities that are actually going to host these games right now. And I know a lot is going on with U.S. soccer in those circles. All right, David, this one is for you. It's a 2-parter. I'll read it all for you. I love this first question. What is the hit rate for your best scout, or what is an acceptable hit rate for scouts in soccer? And then does the access to game film, even at the youth level, change the way you build a scouting organization?
Okay, so hit rate, it doesn't quite work like that, Rob. We, in the course of any given day, I could watch, 15, 20 players. It doesn't happen like that. But really, it's not about hit rate, because a lot of times it's just as important to say no than it is to say yes if you're recommending a guy or you're not. And then even if you recommend a player, the way our organization works, it's not like I say, I saw this guy, I think he's good, and then we sign him. It doesn't work like that. It goes through a process where other people look at him, and then we decide whether or not it's worth showing to the coaching staff. And then eventually, at least with our team, if Bob isn't on board with the guy, then we're not signing him. So the important thing for scouts, at least for us, is that we are identifying players that we think can be successful for our team. And then it becomes, can we afford them? How old are they? Do the coaching staff like them? Do we have salary cap space, roster room? Are they foreign? All those different things. So it's not really so much about a hit rate, because it doesn't work like that, at least with our team. It might work that with other clubs. It might work like that with other sports. But that's not the way it works with us. So like, if you asked me, and people do, like, who have you seen? Who have you signed? Who are you responsible for? There's not really that many guys that I could say. But I will give you an example of one. Is a guy named Juninho, who just retired today from the Galaxy. And Juninho was I had gone, my first year in LA, I had gone on a scouting trip to Brazil. And Sao Paulo wanted to show us a couple of their younger players that they wanted to loan, who they thought were their best players. And the morning of the game, the agent who was responsible called me and said, the kids aren't going to be there. The first team called them up to train, but do you still want to go see the game? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. That's why I'm here. So I go to this game, and it's at their training site, the under-20s in Cochia. And there's no rosters, no jersey numbers, no nothing. It's just a friendly little game. And at the end of it, they say, who did you like? And I said, well, the little kid in the middle with bad hair and the center back with blue shoes. and because the academy coaches, they were a little bit upset that their kids weren't there. They agreed to let us take Junie and Leonardo and a couple other kids to come train with us. And I think it was about a year later, Junie and Leo were on the field against Real Madrid for the Galaxy in an exhibition. And a year after that, they were both MLS Cup champions. So I saw them. Would they have ever been with the Galaxy if I didn't? No, they wouldn't have. So that's really my part of the process, is trying to understand what we need, what we look for, and then try to recommend players to our coaching staff and our scouting staff, and see, and that's my part in it. And then the second thing, the access to game film is huge. Yes, even at the youth level, if we can do it, it always helps. We use scouting services, video scouting services, that we can watch games pretty much anywhere around the world at different levels. And that's really what I've been doing at home the last 2 or 3 months. So video is always makes a difference.
What are some of the unique spots you've been to, David, to scout potential players? We at LAFC, we've been focused on Central and South America. So I've been in Honduras, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala. I've been to almost every country in South America. I do remember that when I was with the Galaxy in 2010, I went to this place called like Copa Macaé, like 3 hours outside of Sao Paulo, on this little dirt crappy field to watch a youth team play. So we too kind of get sent to, I go to college games. I go to youth showcases. So I wouldn't say that I've been to anywhere like too crazy, for me anyway, to watch games. But, if Bob called me and said, we've got a guy in Zimbabwe we need you to look at, then I just
get my shots, and get on the plane.
Michael, a question for you. Does the U.S. men's national team have a realistic pathway to true relevance on the international stage? And if so, how far off is that? Or maybe they are there right now. You're muted.
First, I have to take myself off of mute. Sorry about that. I was cracking another beer.
There you go. Classy, taking down the audio. Nice work.
We're professionals here. Yeah, I mean, I guess the starting point to the question is what's the definition, right? So when people ask that question, oftentimes I'll respond by saying, do you know how many teams have won the World Cup?
Right.
And since people can't answer now, the answer is 8. But a number of them have only won once. You know, England won once in 1966. Even Argentina, they've won twice, but the last time was 1986. So I think what we're trying to do, and what any team is trying to do, unless you're Brazil or Germany, who go into every World Cup thinking they have a chance of winning it, is can you reach the level where you can compete to win a World Cup every time around? And we sometimes we use France as a good example of the idea that there's no such thing as a linear progression. Right? So France in 98 wins the World Cup at home. In 2002, not only do they not get out of their group, but they don't score a goal. 2006, they make it to the final. 2010, they don't get out of their group. I keep trying to have a light attached. It's not going to work. Probably better. So anyway, so where's the U.S., right? So, I mean, for me personally, other than, the failure in the last cycle, and it's a failure, no two ways about it. But I think it's a failure of a cycle and not necessarily a system. But overall, I think you could argue that since 2002, the U.S. has overachieved in World Cups. I think people around the world would say that we've done better than they would have expected that we would have. So how do we get to the point where we're going to consistently put ourselves in the conversation to win World Cups? We have to develop more players. That's the bottom line. Is we've developed good players. We just haven't developed enough. And then once we get there, then you can be in the conversation of being consistently competing at the highest level. But I mean, the group that we have right now, or at least coming up, is pretty exciting as a young group on paper. I mean, the Bundesliga ended this past weekend, and we had players starting on the second and third place teams in the league. And there's a number of younger players there either. And then you talk about Christian at Chelsea. I mean, Christian is a starting player at Chelsea. That's as legitimate as it gets. But we have to have more of those players to be able to put ourselves in the conversation.
David, another question for you. This is from Stephanie Murray. Who is one player you've passed over that you wish you hadn't?
Oh,
right? I like that one. Look, it happens. It happens, right? I'm sure my wife has passed over some boyfriends that she wished she hadn't. She's stuck with me. So mistakes happen out.
We have the list.
Right?
It's a little bit there was a guy who played at Salt Lake, Alvaro Saborio. You remember him, Stoner?
Yep.
So we had a chance when I was at the Galaxy to get him pretty cheaply. And I never really gave him that much consideration. I don't exactly remember why. But he's one that sticks out in my mind that I had seen, and I didn't pass on to Bruce. Joe Corona is another one who, when he had gone from San Diego State to Tijuana, and he was playing in like the second league in Mexico, and we played an exhibition against Tijuana. And after the game, the reporters were asking Bruce, like, "What did you think of the American kid that you played against?" And he looks at me, and I'm like, "Oh shit." I had no idea that Joe Corona was on that team. So we had a chance to sign Joe Corona, and we didn't. So I guess those would be two guys that stick in my mind. But, honestly, Rob, you never know. Because we could have guys, we could sign guys to LAFC that don't work out, but if they went to DC United, they'd be good. So it's kind of hard to say that you don't really know how things would have worked out. But I would say that at least at my time at LAFC, it's not just me, it's a group of people, but I feel pretty good about what we've been able to do since I've been there.
Michael, from Bill, who was or is the player or players that you really enjoyed working with the most? Because we all know that not every player embraces the PR world and the requests that come in.
Include who he doesn't like too, Stoner. I'll give you a couple.
All right, go, David. You go first then. We'll let Michael warm up.
Oh, you were serious about that, huh?
Yeah, you got somebody?
Okay, so there is a guy who, when I was at the Chicago Fire, he's not American, and he did actually choke me, try to choke me during a game. Let's just say he was from Eastern Europe.
The question was people you liked working with. Did you like
I thought
you guys trying to choke you out?
Oh, there's plenty of those.
Maybe that's your thing. I don't know, but.
Oh, geez.
Look, I think we've been lucky, Rob, and you work in different sports, so I think you know this too, that by and large, soccer guys have been great guys to work with, right? There's a lot of, particularly in the last, when we got started, there was a lot of humility. There was a lot of respect. There was a lot of pride in playing for the United States, and also the feeling of responsibility to represent in the right way. So we've had a lot of really good guys along the way. I think we've both known Landon since he was 20 years old.
Even younger.
Yeah. And it was great to get to work with Landon throughout his career. Landon's a really interesting guy, as you know. He's very thoughtful. He's very self-reflective. Sometimes he takes his self-reflection out and is willing to share it with the world. But, you always got honesty out of Landon, which was a great thing to that was fun to be a part of. Tim Howard, Michael Bradley is a good friend. Dave and I have known Michael since he was 12 or 13 years old, because back at DC United when Bob was there in 96 and 97, Michael was running around the training fields and actually would get to jump in and, probably would have made us look bad if we played against him. But, Michael's just a top class human being. Carlos Bocanegra. I think the guys that I respect the most in my personal feelings aside, right? The guys you respect the most who on the media side of things are the ones who are willing to do things when it's hard. Because it's easy when it's easy, right? You scored the game-winning goal. It's easy to go out there and stand in front and talk to a bunch of reporters. Now do it after you just lost the game and you're out of the World Cup. And, one of the enduring memories I'll have from the game against Trinidad when we lost, and obviously it's just absolute devastation, right? I mean, guys are crying, the locker room is dead silent, and we had 30 reporters that had traveled to Trinidad for this. So, it's a pretty tough spot to be in, to have to go and ask guys to go talk to media about the worst moment in their professional lives. And, I had a number of them come to me first and say, I'm ready to go. And, Omar Gonzalez, who walks out in tears, Tim Howard, Josie, Michael Bradley actually got picked for doping that night. So when you get, when you get picked for doping and it's a random, you have to take a urine test and you have to sit by yourself until you can pee. Now imagine having played 90 minutes, sometimes that takes a while. So Michael was sitting in a room in this stadium in Cuba for an hour and a half by himself, stewing on, again, the worst moment of his life or his professional career. And he comes out and is like, everybody's waiting for him. And he went and stood in front of 30 reporters and talked about losing. So those are the moments, I think, where you show what you're made of. It's not when you win, it's how you handle it when you lose.
So let me jump in too.
Yes, please.
So some other guys that my brother didn't mention, he would have, but Chris Armas, who is like the classiest, nicest guy in the world. DeMarcus Beasley, David Beckham is a really, like when he would come, I worked with David, I think for 4 years. But like when he came to training, he was just like, he was the nicest, like gentleman, like every other guy, happy to be there and just a really good person. He mentioned Landon, Josh Wolf. There's, like my brother said, there's so many good guys. CJ Brown that you get to be around the thing that's cool about them is they're good models as professional soccer players, which when you grow up with soccer is really cool. But then they're such good people too that like it makes you see that it's possible that guys can be both. And you wouldn't necessarily know that. You just learn that they're regular guys. So
I want to sneak in a quick fire response here. So this is a what and why, if you will, and it comes from Brandon Kohler. What is the coolest venue, David, that you have seen a match at? Coolest venue you've seen a match at?
I think it's Dortmund. We in 2006 in the World Cup, our broadcast position was perfect. It was midfield. Like it sort of hangs over the field almost. So that like the position was amazing. And we did Germany, Poland. So that was like that was a war. And that's when Germany had Klose and Podolski, who were Polish born, but played for Germany. So the atmosphere in that game was absolutely amazing. So I can't imagine a much better place to see a game than that. Although I would say that our stadium in LA is also one of the better places that I've been to watch games. I've also, my brother and I and my dad and one of our friends, Tony DeGeorge, who went to Delaware, went to an old firm last year. So that's pretty special.
Yeah.
And I've also been to La Bombonera too. But I think the most memorable for me is Dortmund. What about you?
Oh, I'll let your twin answer first. It's because it's a great question. My brain is rolling right now, and so much of it is just sometimes it's on the moments that took place in those stadiums that make it memorable. Michael?
Well, I think that's probably a good way of thinking of it. And so I'd have a couple. I would also say Dortmund, but I would say Dortmund 1994, because when we were after he graduated Delaware and we were in Europe, the first game that we saw outside the U.S. was a Dortmund match that we went to, and we stood in the yellow wall. So we were in the supporter section, which is standing only. It was pissing down rain. But like being a part of that 20,000 strong for 90 minutes was like if we didn't already love soccer, we were like, holy cow, we're going to be back here. So that was a really cool experience. David mentioned going to see the Celtic Rangers is one of the biggest rivalries in the world. So being at one of those matches, going to Liverpool and hearing 60,000 people sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," that'll give you chills.
Yeah. I'll bookend it real fast. Like a simple place like Crew Stadium in the early days, for me, gave me goosebumps because of what it represented. Here's your first ever true soccer-specific stadium in the United States, and what that building meant to the growth of soccer in this country, and to go in there as a worker, and then to go in there as a fan. I just had this stupid grin on my face the whole time. And it's, how it is, like we all are working these games, and we want to be these fans that are there, and we want to enjoy, and we get limited windows to do it. And when you can, it's like, let's get to that beer stand. Where are they screaming and yelling? Let's have fun. I want to unleash. And Crew Stadium, rest in peace, Crew Stadium, pretty soon. It always holds a spot in my heart just because of what it represents to American soccer. But I think that's the beauty of soccer is it's probably a lot like golf. Like, what courses have you played around the world, right? That the golfaholics will say this. And for us, for soccer, it's places you've seen games, and whether it's Brazil or Germany or Costa Rica, or going to Azteca for US, Mexico, my goodness. So many fabulous places. So I know our time is just about out. I want to leave you guys with one quick question here. And the beauty of you two guys is that you have seen soccer in this country go from a niche to an actual dominant force in the marketplace, and something that can move and make changes. So we've seen this growth, incredible leaps and bounds, whether it's MLS or U.S. national team relevancy, and play and sponsorship and media coverage, everything that goes with it. So what are the next one or two things that you guys see coming down the line for soccer in our country? Mike, I'll start with you.
Rob, you froze for me, so I didn't hear the question.
The question was, what do you guys see next for the growth of soccer in this country?
Well, I think we talked about it earlier. The 2026 World Cup is the next, tent post. And I think part of the reason why is because, getting awarded it when we did, there was 8 years to ramp up to. And that just gives so many people, everyone knows how big it's going to be, right? They didn't in 94, but they do now. And so to be able to point to that and say, if you want to get on board, you have to get on board now, I think is just a huge opportunity for the people that you've talked about, sponsors, media, broadcasters, fans, all the different people that already have a foot in the game or are thinking about it. There's years now for them to build around. I think that's going to be our next real shining moment.
David, what do you see it?
I think youth development and academies is the next frontier for us, because my brother mentioned it before that we need to be developing more of our own players. And if you look around the league as far as what the rosters are made up, there's still a lot of teams that play majority of foreign players. And so I think the development of youth soccer and coaching at the youth level is really sort of, for us, I think, is the next frontier for soccer and how we continue to grow and develop as a sport in our country, because the professional side has come a long way. We all know you mentioned Crew Stadium, but from stadiums and facilities, television, broadcasting, even refereeing has grown. And so for me, I think the most important thing is how we start with kids younger and produce better players younger. And then we can have American kids playing in our league and then, moving on to whatever else it is they want to do.
Two excellent answers, and probably a really nice way to end this wonderful conversation. Team Camerman, thanks for inviting me along on this Delaware road trip, guys.
Stoner, we were trying to remember when we first met.
It had to have been around DC United when I was covering MLS, probably in that 97, 98, 99 window would be my guess. Because we would play pickup games too, right? When we were on the road with you guys, or when you guys were working with the national team, we would be part of those early morning kick-arounds at ungodly hours after difficult, challenging evenings.
I remember a staff game in Columbus. Was it an all-star game or?
Oh, that's a good one. It might be. I just remember it was cold. It was cold that morning for some reason.
We played 7v7.
Yeah.
And it was
those are the good days, man.
It was super competitive that day because Fernando Clavijo, God rest his soul, he was on the other team. And I remember we're playing these small-sided games. We're playing maybe to 8 and it's 7-7 or something. And there's a 50-50 ball with me and Fernando. And I'm going, he's going. I look up and I see that he's going in. I'm like, well, screw it. He goes, I go. And we just crunched each other in a staff game. And like, I think I was probably hurting. I think he was hurting. We both got up, didn't say a word, and just kept going. And I was like, wow.
Yep, I remember that game.
Stoner's never seen a tackle like that in his life.
Because I'm too smart, I avoid them.
But I also do remember, not to sound like a dick, but I remember thinking, hey, Stoner's actually a pretty good player.
Look, before we kick it back to Leslie to say goodbye, I think it's worth it too for the people here to appreciate what Rob has done for the game too. I mean, we talked about that we've known each other since '97, but for someone who continues to push the game, not just on camera but behind the scenes, those kind of contributions are invaluable. And those are the things that you don't get to see, but it's our job to fight for those things in different ways. And Rob's been doing it in his capacity for a long time. And I'm sure he could have given it up at this point if he wanted, being the not just the college football guy, put that aside. He's play-by-play for pro bowling
and darts,
but he's still sticking with soccer. So that's certainly something that we appreciate.
It's my DNA. It's my love. And thank you. I appreciate those words, Michael.
And Stoner, I would add to that too. Like, I mean, I don't know, for the people that are watching, that like my brother and I throughout my career very consciously stay behind the scenes, and I don't even think I'm on LAFC's website. So this, like, talking about myself or my career or what my brother's done, it's not something that I normally do. And we were happy to do it for Delaware. And so for the people who got to watch this, and just to that you were willing to be a part of it, like it means a lot. And it's a special thing that I guess you wouldn't normally get to do, to have someone like you do something like this with guys like us. So thank you. It was really cool.
I've done a lot of things with guys like you already. We're all right, man. We're all right. I appreciate it.
I almost told.
You were almost out, Stoner.
There was a 2006 story that I'm not going to get into the details, but I will say this. If you remember, before we all left for, well, I don't know if you went or not, but before we all left for Germany,
yeah.
ESPN had us all in Hartford.
Yep.
And there was a staff party, and some things might have happened at the staff party and after. And I remember the next day I saw you, and you were kind of grumpy about something. I don't know what it was, but I had to trust in you. Like I thought I needed to cheer you up, and I told you a story about the night before that I knew I could trust you with.
Yep.
And your face,
I remember
just
that
like
story
that.
now. I remember that story. We'll keep that one offline.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much, Rob, for running the conversation between David and Michael, keeping it sane. I really appreciate this. And I hope all of our participants have had a great time tonight. Very lively conversation. So David, Michael, and Rob, thank you very much from the University of Delaware. Rob, you are an honorary Blue Hen now, and I will send you a
Fighting Blue Hen.
What's that?
Fighting Blue Hen.
Fighting.
Are we not fighting Blue Hens anymore?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Okay, so Rob is an honorary Fighting Blue Hen.
All right.
Thank you for sharing your stories of soccer and your journeys around the world, all of you. It's been very inspirational, and I think the attendees have had a great conversation tonight. I also want to thank the attendees for joining us tonight. We thank you for submitting your questions, and we hope that we have engaged you for a few minutes during the summer evening. We will be sending out a short survey tomorrow, and hope you'll fill that in and let us know how you feel about this event. And we will be recorded this event, and it will be available to everyone next week. So David and Michael, you're in infamy now, and just so you know. I also just want to mention a few upcoming events that we have. Again, we're going to continue the virtual world until this world that we're in allows us to do in-person events again. But we have a baseball chat that we are doing on Tuesday, July 7th, next Tuesday, Inside Baseball with a Washington Nationals field reporter. Here, 2007 UD alumnus Dan Kolko talk about his journey from WVUD radio and STN 49 TV to cover the World Series champion Washington Nationals as a field reporter. In a conversation with his classmate, Tom Berlin, Dan will share about his 8 years of bringing baseball to life. So you got a little soccer tonight. Next week, you can get some baseball. And then on Saturday, July 11th and Wednesday, July 22nd, we will be hosting East and West Coast cooking classes for alumni parents and friends who want to get in the kitchen and toss some good foods together. We hope you'll sign up for these events. They're all available on the alumni website. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank our speakers and our attendees. Everyone have a good evening.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Leslie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good stuff, Stoner.
See you guys. Thank you.
See ya.